how do I teach ASL to hearing people who don't know the language? I teach the same as you should teach any language. I try to stay in the target language, in American Sign Language, so that it's more like an immersion experience, like if you were going to study Spanish and go to Mexico or something. I think that's the most important thing, is trying to use a lot of visuals and trying to stay in the target language the whole time. That would be the main special technique would be to have students signing with each other, watching me sign and watching different people sign. I use videos so that the students experience watching deaf people sign in different, ways of signing things. Ideally, it would be a deaf person teaching and not me, but that's how it goes. What are other ways that a deaf person communicates? Anna could answer that. Were there any difficulties I faced along the way in learning ASL? Probably the hardest thing of being a hearing person learning ASL is that, especially if you want to go into teaching, most of the deaf community feel like a hearing person's place is as an interpreter, and that our place is not in a classroom teaching sign language because it's their language. And so I never intended to be a sign language teacher. I always wanted to be an interpreter because I respected their world and I was part of that community. But then when someone found me and asked me to teach at SDA because there was nobody to teach. So no one was even applying. And so I said I would do it, but I always say if a deaf person came along and could do it, I would much rather them be teaching. I understand the value in that. But it is hard as a hearing person when you love the language and you want to teach it and you enjoy doing what you do, that you're kind of criticized a little bit by the deaf community, even though I understand it. Because if I took Spanish, I definitely would want someone who was from a Spanish-speaking country, and I was just as judgmental of people who weren't, native speakers of Spanish. So it's like, I totally get it. What are your processes from learning or memorizing the languages? The best way, certain things were hard for me and I wasn't happy with my own fluency, so I joined the Deaf Bowling League. So it was like my own immersion experience, and I went to all kinds of deaf events to just try to immerse myself into the language. And I did the same thing with Spanish and the same thing with Czech. I'm a strong believer from experience that, like, if you want to learn a language, you have to dive in. You have to be immersed in some way. Do I use ASL to help me in other areas of life? I actually think I use signs sometimes to remember things or recall things. And I use my hands for talking and communication in my own way. Whether I need to, I don't know. But I do think I'll use things like numbers. When I'm doing math, I use ASL numbers, and it helps my memory for sure. Do I know differences between all the styles or regional differences? There's so many differences, like Black ASL, if you watch that, developed when they were segregated schools. The East Coast has different signs that it doesn't matter if I'm fluent, I have to check constantly, like almost monthly, to see there'll be new signs added that I don't know, and I have to check East Coast, West Coast. Definitely, I noticed so many differences regionally. If you are deaf, I'm not deaf, but I see a lot of, as a hearing person, my experiences are that you go into the deaf community and there's a lot of expectations. I know those expectations now, but in the beginning it can feel harsh because deaf people are so straightforward. So you can feel quickly judged, and your instinct is to be like, oh, deaf people aren't very nice. But I think it really is them excited that there's someone new in the community, and then they'll get even more excited at your willingness to be flexible and to meet their expectations, so to speak. And then as time goes by, I've realized I'm more relaxed because I see other teachers who are younger who are really scared to reach out to the deaf community because of being judged. And I don't care, because I kind of take the judgment. And even as a student, if you feel like you're being judged by your teacher or they think you're not good, I don't take it as a criticism. I sort of just take it as feedback, right? So if they're judging me in some way, it's feedback to me that I maybe need to act differently or ask them how they want me to do something, because it's going to happen a lot. It's like, especially as a teacher, you'll get criticism from deaf people a lot. Comes with the territory. That's it. Do you have any other questions? That's all your questions.
That's about it.
All right.
Anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I love it. I love ASL and I love this job. And I wish there could be more openness from our community to welcome and help deaf people get jobs like I have, teaching hearing kids. Because there is a big, even UCSD has a program where they teach deaf teachers how to teach in a deaf classroom, but they don't really have a program that's ASL teaching in a hearing classroom. And I think that would be amazing, because that'd be an amazing experience for students to have a deaf teacher. So I wish I would see more deaf people in this environment. But when you think about it as a student, it's hard, because how are they going to communicate with everybody else? It'd be kind of isolating. Would they have an interpreter all the time? Who's going to pay for the interpreter? There's all these questions, but that's it.
Okay.